Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Leandra the TBR0, and usually this channel is dedicated to my goal of lessening my physical TBR, but today I thought I would showcase my reading spreads for my 2023 bullet journal. This is the second year that I'm doing a bullet journal. I had so much fun in 2022, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this new journal ends up changing, what I keep the same, and already there have been some significant changes specifically to the reading spreads that I will be filling out throughout the year. If you are interested in seeing what spreads I decided to use last year, I will include a link to that video down below. I'll also try to put it on the screen somewhere. And speaking of, I do think that it's important that as you're creating your own spreads to be curious, check out other YouTubers, those who also are pretty much dedicated to their bullet journals, and that's what helped me, especially when I was first beginning in 2022 trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I definitely did some investigating, checked out what other people were using, and then adapted them to my own bullet journal. So feel free to do that with me and other YouTubers alike. I also wanted to highlight the different tools that I'm using this year, those that I used last year, and just kind of seeing how I'm growing as a bullet journaler. So firstly, the bullet journal that I used last year was a really simple minimalist art branded bullet journal. It's quite big. You can see that I wanted a large canvas myself because I didn't really know how much space I needed when I was creating my bullet journal spreads. You can see the way I kind of designed them. I really liked to sometimes create huge art installations within them, and other times I just ended up creating a very small sketch. So it just depended on the book that I used. But this ended up being about maybe $10, and it has the little band to close it up. It also has two different bookmark ribbons. So I really enjoyed this, and I ended up choosing to do a very similar journal this year as well, and I will show you. So I ended up changing the color though. I got this really kind of nice golden yellow color, but again, it's got the band, it's got the two different ribbons so I can bookmark certain pages, and it's the same brand. It's still minimalist art, but it just doesn't have the brand logo on the front this time, and it does feel a little bit sturdier, even though it genuinely was the same price as the one I got last year, if not cheaper. I think I might have gotten it cheaper. Last year, my only tool that I used was this particular set of 10 markers, and the Zebra is the brand. Again, only about $10. I made sure that when I was starting this process that I was keeping my costs low, mainly because I didn't know if I would end up being someone who enjoyed journaling. So I didn't want to invest all this amount of money into something that might be a hobby that is short-lived. So this had all the main colors and includes black. That was probably the one I used the most, obviously, because I wrote all of my journal entries in black. And I did not have a ruler, so instead I just used the nice edge of this particular package, and that's why all of the markers are still sitting in their package, because I took advantage of that too. With that said, I definitely upgraded a bit this year because I realized how much I enjoyed bullet journaling. So the first thing I ended up buying for 59 cents is a nice wooden ruler. This way I can kind of just keep the edges nice, and obviously there are other advantages. The idea that you can kind of make measurements depending on if you want some continuity in any type of features you have. So 59 cents, not a huge investment, but I'm already very happy that I bought it. And then a much bigger investment that I made, in a sense, is just the fact that I upgraded markers. It's the same brand, it's still Zebra, but this time it's a 25 count pack, and actually the markers themselves are various shades, so I can kind of pick and choose there. And then if I just grab one marker, you can see that there's actually two ends. So this has this kind of end, and then if I were to flip it over, it's a little bit more pointed. And I bought this not knowing that. Obviously I didn't read the packaging very well, but it's a feature that I am already really happy to have. And this was actually probably the most expensive thing that I bought for my bullet journaling hobby, and I think it was about $25 at Target. And finally, I ended up just getting some simple Papermate black marker pens. so that I can keep writing in black marker because I like doing that. Okay, well, those are the supplies that I utilize for my own bullet journal. As you can see, even though I have clearly made some upgrades coming into 2023, I haven't made too many significant changes or, you know, utilized my bank account more than I actually would have wanted to. So this is just a lesson to you that you can make your bullet journals as elaborate as you'd like. Maybe you don't even like to really draw and you just simply want a bullet journal to write down your notes. Totally fine. So it's really up to you and what kind of journal you want to utilize. Let's get into my spreads. Don't forget to like and subscribe. So I haven't actually filled out the table of contents yet. That was because I was trying to figure out which spreads I wanted to include, and so eventually I'm going to have to get to that. But my title page is quite simple. It is actually one that I prefer compared to 2022. I like the way this one came out far better. It is very simple. It says 2023 reading journal, and the books, the spines that I decided to include are actually a bit of an homage to my favorite books that I read in 2022. I thought that could be really fun to highlight a few books that I really enjoyed and maybe give me some inspiration as I'm trying to figure out what books I'm going to read in 2023. I can look at those and remember that they were great and maybe try to find books that are similar to them. I ended up creating a 23 reading challenges in 2023. This is slightly different from a similar spread I did in 2022, and that was obviously 22 reading goals in 2022. I changed the wording to challenges because some of these are things that I'm actually very okay with not completing if that doesn't happen. You can see that a lot of it's more fill-in as well. For instance, goal number 3 is read from 10 different genres. At the moment, I have filled in that I've read a mystery at least, and I'm not sure if I recorded this before or after, but I also just finished a thriller, so that is the second out of 10 genres that I'm hoping to read this year. I wanted to keep it very flexible, especially because last year when I was reflecting on the goals that I had for that time, I realized that a lot of them, you know, I couldn't be sure if I actually was on track or not if I didn't simply flip through my reading journal. So I thought this would be a lot more simple. For instance, buddy reading 5 times, reading at least 4 stories, or essay collections. I also have, as my 21st challenge, and it certainly is going to be a challenge, is reading 15 new Golden Age detective fiction authors. You can see that I've also made a few challenges as far as the size of the books I'm reading, from a 400-page book to over a 500 or 600. And as I said, those are definitely challenges that I hope to push myself to do because I'm someone who tends to lean towards the books that are a lot quicker. I think my sweet spot is probably 250 to 300 pages. My next spread involves really simplistically social media, specifically Instagram and YouTube. I think I was trying to be a lot more elaborate last year, and this time I'm just like, let's keep it simple and document my follower count. And then when it comes to Leandra the TBR0, I'm just keeping track of the videos that I do post. And so number 3 is going to end up being this very bullet journal video. Again, I made some alterations. If you want to check out what I did in 2022, please feel free. But my next spread is 23 TBRs in 2023. So books that I want to read from my physical TBR if it wasn't evident. And last time I ended up listing out 22 books, physical books that have their titles and authors already marked down. This time I'm actually being specific in genre, but I'm keeping it open-ended with which books I actually pick up. I think that allowing yourself flexibility when you set certain goals or creating certain spreads for myself, it's a lot easier for me to then embark on that challenge. And I feel like even though I'm lessening the difficulty level because I'm giving myself more opportunities to kind of pick and choose, that doesn't make it any different from if I simply just said, hey, I want to read 23 books from my physical TBR. And this obviously ensures that I'm doing that. It doesn't really matter which books they are, if we're being honest, as long as they are from my physical TBR. And then I have books purchased. Again, keeping it really simple because I just want to keep track of which ones I purchase. And that could either be books that I've purchased that are pre-orders, books that I've purchased that I haven't read before, or I'm still considering this. I may keep track of the books I buy that I really loved. Maybe I read it and it was a library copy, or someone let me borrow their copy and I realized that I really want it in my collection. I might keep track of those as well, because I did do that quite often last year. And then I have 2 more spreads. The one on the left-hand side is advanced readers copies, and the one on the right is books I've DNF'd. So both of these are new. I didn't include either spreads in 2022. The one on the left I think would be fascinating just because I think that I actually have more access to ARCs this year, which is why I think it would be fun to keep track of it. Last year, I just didn't receive enough, especially in January 2022, to warrant creating a page for it. And then for books I've DNF'd, I was so proud of myself last year for how many books I DNF'd. It might be a weird thing to be proud of, but usually back in the day, I used to be someone who would just fight and fight and fight to finish a book. And now I have personally found in my own reading life how freeing it is to decide to DNF a book that just isn't working for me at the moment. And so I wanted to kind of keep track of that, and also just keep track of the books that I've tried, so that, I don't know, one day if I do want to try them again, it would be interesting to see how long ago I did have my first attempt. This one is probably my favorite page, and it was my favorite page last year as well, and that's just simply a grid that keeps track of books read in 2023. I remember last year being really apprehensive because I did end up being able to keep, I think, 99 squares in my particular spread last year, and usually my goal is 50, so I was like, this is ridiculous. It's only going to be half filled if I even reach that goal this year, and I ended up smashing it and almost completely filling the page. So even though my goal remains 50 books this year, I am very comfortable with having, I think it ends up being 110 squares. And if we can just take a moment to really appreciate my armchair, I am in love with it. I did not know how it would turn out. I loved my chair last year, but this one in itself is just far better. I don't know if I'm becoming a better artist, or the fact that I did decide to splurge on more marker variations this year. I was able to include shading and be a little bit more creative in adding like a pillow cushion and a blanket, which I didn't do last year. But I loved the chair I did last year too, but I do think that this one shows that I'm getting a little bit better maybe. And then on the right-hand side, just a plain page that says genres, because one detail that I realized I really enjoyed keeping track of that I didn't create a spread for last year is keeping track of which genres I'm reading and how many. I think that I discovered partway through my reading journal that I like to do that, so I was able to somehow, I think at the end of every month, start keeping track of the different genres I was reading, which allowed me to, at the end of the year, count all of them up. But this year, because I know that I really enjoy that statistic, I decided to create an actual spread so that every time I finish a book, I can just kind of give a little tally to which genre I just finished, and then I can kind of, as I go, see which ones I'm leaning towards. Is there this strange dark horse genre that has become really popular for me? Just fun stuff like that. The next 2 spreads are a mix of things that I had last year and ones I didn't. On the left-hand side, series tracker, I did have that last year, and I am hoping to be a bit more successful this year. I had a goal last year of finishing 3 series, and I didn't finish any. So this year, I'm challenging myself to simply finishing 1. So we'll see how it goes. I do have a couple books that are a part of the trilogy, and they're the 3rd book in the series. So it is doable for me to finish at least 1 series. I am just going to see if that happens. I'm not putting any pressure on myself. And then on the right-hand side, publication year, that was another statistic that I found myself wanting to know that I didn't think would be something interesting to me at the beginning of 2022. So you can see this is a learning process. As we create bullet journals, as we're creating spreads, as we kind of learn more about ourselves as readers, we realize which statistics are actually fascinating to us and which ones are simply just something we saw on the internet that we're like, oh, maybe that's interesting. And then I realized I'm not interested in that. So publication year is one that I am very much interested in. And I did kind of pick and choose when I wanted to know a particular year and when I wanted to know a decade, because I personally read more books either in the Golden Age detective fiction time period, which is 20s, 30s, and 40s, and those that are recent releases in the last 5 years. Those tend to be my hotspot time periods. So I made sure to kind of break those up by year, whereas, for instance, I rarely read books from the 70s, 80s, or 90s. So I'm giving that an entire decade, and we'll see how many I read in that decade. And next, I have acquisition methods, reading format, and new to me authors. These are all aspects of my reading life that I'm really interested in. And again, I didn't really think to include them in my yearly spreads. So for acquisition methods, I've broken it down to, library books, my physical TBR, new books, meaning I've just bought them, and then ARCs and promotional books. So the difference between that is the fact that promotional books are books that are completely finished, they're new, you can buy them. It's because I am a part of a network or organization where we do book tours. Basically, my job when it comes to book tours is that I sign up for a finished copy, I receive it in time to read it, and then provide my own thoughts and feelings about it, recommend it to my own followers, and I wanted to keep that separate from ARCs that I receive directly from the publisher. And then for reading format, because I have become such a fan of audiobooks, I thought it could be fun to see how many audiobooks I read, how many ebooks I read, which I'm assuming is always going to be the lowest number, because if I'm going to physically read a book, I want the print version before I want the ebook. That just has never changed. So I already kind of have a pretty decent prediction about what's going to happen, but I wanted to keep track anyway. And new to me authors, that is another statistic that I thought was so fascinating that I simply didn't think about until the end of the year, when I realized that I do tend to read new to me authors more often than I read repeat authors. I do think that my goals in 2023 involve trying to read more repeat authors, but I still want to keep track of authors that I discover that are going to be first time experiences for me. And finally, when it comes to my annual spreads, the left-hand side has my monthly statistics, and this is pretty much exactly the same as another spread that I did in 2022. I really like to keep track per month, whether I give books 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 stars. I like to see what my average is per month. For instance, if I had kind of a poor month, maybe it'll be like a 3-star situation because I've had a 1 or 2 star that's brought the average down. Sometimes I had months where I read amazing book after amazing book, and so my average ended up being like 4 stars. So I just found that really fascinating. And again, I don't know if I'm just becoming a better drawer or the fact that my tools are better this year, but I am very happy with the mug that I drew compared to the mug that I drew last year on the very same page. I kind of like to parallel and draw similar things, I've also discovered. And finally, we have my head-to-head, which I actually condensed into 1 page in my 2022 spreads. You'll be able to see if you go check that video out that I drew that across 2 spreads, and that looked really cool as well. But I figured that I actually am not that interested in finding out what my book of the year is. With that said, I'm interested enough to have a spread for it. The aspect I'm more interested in is the fact that what my favorite book per month ends up being. After that, it kind of ends up being blurry, because when I was doing that same spread, filling it out in 2022 in December, I realized that a lot of times, eventually books were being, head to head with books of completely different genres, and it's really hard to compare those. So while I don't think it's the most useful spread, in the end, I kind of like having it. And so I decided to do it again, but this time, because I don't find it as important, I only dedicated 1 page to it. And here's a sneak peek of how my monthly spreads are actually going to end up going. I really did change this a significant amount. This time I have on my cover page, I suppose you could call it, for the chapter that is January, I have it saying January 2023, and then I also include the calendar because I do like to see my days read. And on top of that, I've decided to color code and mark which days I've read which book, which I kind of did do last year throughout the various months, but I just think it's a bit more uniform now. And I've actually eliminated my TBR spread because I don't know, I want to mood read more this year. Sometimes if I do have a set TBR, I probably will insert a page, you know, depending on which month I do it, but I'm not going to make it a uniform thing. And having on the calendar on the right hand side that list of books in order, that'll show which books I'm picking up. And you can see, if you were kind of paying attention to the pages, that Book Club to Death is one that I show that I marked and I read during the 1st and 2nd of the year, of the month of January. I didn't pick it up after that because I ended up DNFing it. So it still does kind of keep track of the books I picked up per month anyway. Then we move on to my first reviews. It's really exciting. I switched up my design a little bit and the information that I think is interesting. As I said before, you will discover which information you find interesting and which ones you want to keep. I'm not that interested in page numbers anymore. Before, I used to keep track of how many pages per review. And then at the end of the year, when I was calibrating my statistics, I just didn't care. So I didn't really include that this year. With that said, though, I did include for Death of Jezebel the hours that I, listened to it in, because I do think that's kind of interesting. We'll see if I end up doing anything with that information. But I kept the inclusion of the star rating. I also included the backstory of why I picked up the book when I did, which I still think is really cool. And I include a little drawing that reflects kind of what's going on in the book or some type of theme or image. I also, for Sad Cypress, turning the page, ended up doing the same thing, but the one thing that I kept the same is kind of including one color as a theme per book. The drawing itself, I used to do that too, but now because I just have more colors, I really like the idea of including different colors into the drawing. For instance, I drew a rose, and of course with the leaves, I included green, even though obviously the page theme is more of a kind of pinkish red mauve color. And that's what I intend to do moving forward with my various reviews. I'm really proud of how this bullet journal has turned out so far. I really enjoyed trying to figure out what I wanted for 2023, especially when I already had a frame of reference for what my 2022 bullet journal looked like. If you are someone who bullet journals every single year and you've got tips and tricks, then please leave them below. I'm sure that myself and those watching this will really enjoy reading those. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, consider subscribing and ringing that bell, because I do intend to periodically include more bullet journal content on this channel. And yeah, I really am looking forward to the books that I'm going to be reading in 2023 and eventually adding them one by one to my bullet journal. I hope you guys have a great month, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!